Hello, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Witch Cafe, your safe place to talk about anything strange, paranormal, fringe, UFO, UAP, whatever you want to call it. I know you fancy people like the UAP nowadays. But tonight I'm very excited to have Justin Bamforth on. And I slur my words, so I'm trying to enunciate everything because I talk fast. So sometimes people are like, what'd you say? But I want to take a moment to thank anybody listening now or later in the chat on audio only. Please go give me a follow on Spotify. I just started moving all my good stuff over there, all my shows, so you can do audio only. And yes, just leave feedback, share all that good stuff. So let's get to our guest. Justin is the author of The Spectrum, Glimpses of the Paranormal and Encounters with the Strange. This is the book. Oh, they're going to disappear. Darn it. I don't even have a green screen. It's just okay. Well, anyways, I'll post a picture of it. The picture is like in the thumbnail of the book. But I'm going to have Justin first. Thank you for coming, Justin. Thanks for taking the
Yeah.
time out of your night to show up here.
Yeah, no problem.
And
Thanks for having me.
yes, I'm so excited to talk to you. Do you want to tell everybody like who you are and what you do? Because there's nothing I do. I don't like reading off a bio, the bios in the description, but I like to hear it from the author. Like, who are you, and what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I'm a researcher, an investigator, an author into all this, unexplained madness of UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, psychic phenomena, or what I refer to as just high strangeness. I came from a rather haunted background myself, growing up in a haunted house, but then I come to realize, after looking back on it in hindsight, it was more of like a haunted experience, triggered by just like negative vibes that were brewing in the house at the time. My parents are going through like an ugly divorce, and I look back on it nowadays, and I think maybe that's what added fuel to the fire and created something more metaphysical to manifest. But that got me thinking about this topic, and I just started reading up on it. I got into investigating back in my teenage years, tagging along with other investigators and ghost groups. Again, reading as much as I could on the subject, educating myself, connecting with others. Before long, like many of you watching today, you start earning the reputation of the ghost guy, right? Or gal in your circle of friends and network. So after doing that and earning that kind of weird reputation, I wanted to take it a step further, maybe see what others, outside of the usual paranormal circles thought. And I invited, a handful of people to a small online forum called Normal Paranormal. And that kind of sparked conversation in all different high strangeness topics. And then later it developed into today's current website and blog and various social media channels I try to stay up on. And forgive me though, but all under the same name, Normal Paranormal. It serves the same purpose, but on a much larger scale. And now I receive messages from people all over the world who want to share their experiences with me, which I later decided to kind of chronicle and compile into a book that kind of thought about some of these other concepts, which I published, and I titled it The Spectrum, Glimpses of the Paranormal and Encounters with the Strange. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. So I'm going to give you kind of like a mini book review right now, and I love the book, so don't be afraid. So to
Great.
me, this is what I kind of jotted down after I wrote the book. You take us on an eerie journey into the strange and unknown encounters with entities that many people have experienced. You not only give the reader the chilling accounts of the others, but also give a great deal of yourself and your thoughts on the topics that you discuss, anything from UFOs to on encounters with beings that seem to be trying to appear human but fail miserably at it. And my only suggestion for anybody reading Justin's book is to do it with the light on. The accounts range from harrowing to just plain weird. And after reading in it, I was left with like this strange feeling that just kind of lingered until daylight because I've lived,
Hmm.
similar experiences. So, but in my opinion, not that anybody's asking my opinion, it's a must read for paranormal and UFO enthusiasts and researchers. And it kind of gave me Master of Deception vibes, like the Jacques Vallée book. Like
Hmm.
the feeling after reading Jacques Vallée's book, that eerie feeling, I got that after reading your book. Not that I'm like, it's not even like fearful. It's just like,
Hmm.
what the heck, So, guys, read it with the light on. Don't read it when you're alone, which I did one night, and I was like, Is my alarm on? Like like that's gonna keep an alien that can be transmedium out or whatever, right? Whatever beings.
Oh,
So,
shoot.
but yeah, that was I thought it was a great book, you know, and, I have it linked. I have your website linked and the book linked in the description, so if somebody wants to grab it after listening to this, it will be there. I have a couple questions, you know, and we'll see where they take us.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks you, so you're an author, you wrote this book, The Spectrum. What is it about? What is your book about? How would you explain that to people?
Well, the spectrum is kind of like this catch-all term for like the paranormal that I started tossing around to just better wrap my head around, all of these various experiences of the phenomenon that people experience, I think, every day. Whether or not this is truly coming from an external source or perhaps more of an internal source. It's fascinating, and people are experiencing this sort of stuff. But what it is exactly, that I don't know. So I kind of used the spectrum as that catch-all phrase, and just to look in depth at like all of the different experiences and to see if there's any similarities or commonalities or shared traits, patterns that might cross over from like ufology to parapsychology to mental phenomenon, to cryptid encounters. And I found out that just by interviewing a lot of people and looking at this is, yeah, they might all be connected. They might be all part of this spectrum of high strangeness, so to speak. And I think there's also, well, looking back on it now, there's an aspect that I didn't really get into, but I'm starting to really pursue this one avenue, is this generational component tied to it. I've started asking about family histories and such, and I'm beginning to think, especially in a lot of the more extreme situations, that there could be like a certain type of doorway that maybe was inadvertently opened by some family member. And maybe, there's some sort of inadvertent invitation for the phenomenon to enter. But I'm looking at this more closely now. So we'll see where it leads.
Yes, the generational thing is something that plays out with a lot of experiencers in general, and experiencer meaning like kind of, you know, it's somebody that's experienced something unexplainable, or we would say paranormal, you know, as the umbrella term. I do like in the beginning how you mentioned that you were having a haunted experience, not so much a haunting. That's very
Mhm.
interesting phrasing. So, can you break that down for me? Because I haven't heard anybody. It makes sense to me because I had a similar situation growing up. But
Hmm.
can you explain what you mean by having a haunted experience?
Yeah, so I think there's this aspect to the phenomenon that, again, is tied to us, and I think it's our mindset, or our mindset, our state of mind, and I think that is what could be triggering certain things to, I guess, be amplified or maybe even manifest. And I think in my case, as a kid, witnessing just a terrible, toxic environment, with my parents, I think that that may have caused something to possibly manifest, that may have been there on like a very micro level, and it took different forms that for all the different people involved there. It appeared to them in different ways. I remember hearing a lot of like uh, unexplainable sounds, seeing a lot of shadow entities pacing back and forth, outside of my bedroom. I remember having one of those Hat Man encounters that a lot of people have. Uh, there was a lot going on. My brother remembers certain aspects differently. Um, and my father and my mother, they also had different events. So it was almost like there was some sort of energy there, but I can't definitively say it was an external thing, right? Because prior to that, I don't recall anything going on there. Um, to my knowledge, the house didn't really have a history of haunted activity. And when I look at some of these other case studies, right, like for example, like the Amityville, horror house, right, a very famous location. After the people left, not as much activity has taken place there, since. When you look at like the Conjuring house, same thing, right? There's certain locations, and I think maybe certain people, they tend to bring something in there, a catalyst in there, and that creates, I think, the haunted experience more so than a definitive haunted house. Does that make sense? Or
Absolutely, because I like I said, it sounds a lot like after reading your book and you saying that, people would say things to me or they ask me still to this day, like, "Oh, so you're a medium?" I'm like, "Well, my grandma was a medium, but and as a child, I didn't have a lot of ghost experiences, but there were other things that were happening in the
mm,
house, and it makes you wonder, like, who is the catalyst for this?" And it's passed down generationally,
mhm,
and and this is a common trend that we even see if you with UFO experiencers or experiencers of extraterrestrials or beings that they automatically just put into the ET bin, even though we really don't know what they
mhm,
are. So, and it is
mhm.
interesting that it appears to different people in different ways, and it's just all these commonalities, but they're not all so common, which your book kind of covers, like you said, the spectrum of that. You mentioned it being triggered maybe by some sort of like trauma or something kind of like not so savory happening in the house or something like less
Mhm.
desirable, divorce or fighting or just and not people get triggered by. Sometimes these things show up and they scare people more, and sometimes these things shows up to people as almost like what we here would learn about being called angels, right? Like these guardian angel
Mhm.
type things show up. It's not always a scary shadow figure. And sometimes with
Yeah.
shadow figures, like, they're not necessarily bad. Is it just creepy and scary because it's a shadow and you don't know what it is? It's unfamiliar, so it's scary?
Mm.
Or does it actually have this feeling to, like, cause harm? And I know that people have experienced both, but the whole shadow person thing alone is enough to make people think, like, "What is going on here?" And the shadow might not be a spirit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to this fear of the unknown, right? People, and I think that's why certain people are kind of like, fearful of aliens, of UFOs, whatever you want to call them, because they don't know what their motive is, right? They're just showing up. But then on the flip side, like, people are also scared of what we call ghosts because, again, they don't know why they're showing up, right? And a lot of times when these various phenomena take place, it kind of questions that worldview, right? And I think that's what scares people the most. Is it calls into question what we've been led to believe, and I don't know. It's certainly perplexing, but it's okay not to have the answer too.
Oh, absolutely, and sometimes the people that have the answers end up finding out that that answer is not the answer. The question is, are you having an experience? And you have a part in your book, and I think it was like 2 sentence, but I was just like, yes, that like hits home. Like the whole people just saying like, oh, well, this, that, and this happened, and it is what it is. And you
Oh
said
yeah.
you kind of like that phrase has always driven me nuts because I encounter people saying it on all sorts of different occasions. Usually when they're just it's like they don't know what to do, but they're also complacent to the situation by not digging deeper, by not fighting into some truth or fighting against something. Um, why does that irk you when it comes to strange phenomena? Like, I'm saying, "Oh, books are flying off and hit me in the head," and it is what it is, you know? Like how is that okay? Like
Yeah, it's not okay, really, because it's essentially a statement of apathy, right? Or reflecting an apathetic mindset. It's essentially just telling a person like to just give up and accept certain things to be happening, even though we may not necessarily agree with them, or we may not necessarily want them to happen, right? So, like, I think it's important to question things, right? And to encourage those intellectual muscles to kind of like, I don't know, actually think for a change. The, the phenomenon, it doesn't present answers, right? It just presents questions. But I think in disguise, those questions are the answers. And I know that kind of like, you know, is kind of like, it sounds like an Alice in Wonderland type thing, right? But like, I think when we approach this topic, we need to approach it from a non-conventional mindset, or an approach that is not necessarily linear, right? It could be, a circular approach. It could be an octagonal approach. I don't know. But how are we expected to find the right answers if we're not asking the right questions? So that's why I really can't stand that statement. And, I just wish it would just go away. Maybe it will one day. So,
Well, hopefully it goes away for a lot of us because it's that's almost like throwing in the towel in some cases.
yeah.
You've been studying this for a while, and you have been sort of, you know, hearing every type of story, every type of experience, every type of entity, I guess not every, because we really don't know what's out there, but, a broad spectrum of positive stories and also scary or just strange. Has this like affected your well-being at any point in time or your health? Because a lot of people that listen to others' stories forget, like, we take it on sometimes in a way. Sometimes somebody will tell us a story and we stay up all night thinking about it, or we will go down this rabbit hole of research for them and only to be just as weirded out as them because nobody has the answers, like you said, that answers a question. So, has this taken like a toll on you at all, learning about all this unexplainable stuff?
Yeah, it has at certain points. I to anyone like insane enough to actually want to pursue this topic, I say to them, know your limits, right? Surround yourself with people who can keep you in line, who can just, check in on you and just make sure that you're not going down that dark rabbit hole. I've seen and heard of many individuals who have pursued this like long enough to where, it's led them to some pretty dark places mentally and emotionally. This phenomenon, it's not to be underestimated. There's a trickster element at play here, and I think that's often overlooked by naive investigators at times. Proceed with caution. There's a reason why my second book was not a paranormal book. It was a poetry book, right? I needed a break from this. The day I published that book, strangeness began. When I was writing the paranormal book, strangeness was taking place. After I got off the phone with certain people that I interviewed, weird things took place. And not to scare you, but I've done some interviews where strange things have taken place to the host, right after the show. So, in fact, I just on what's today, Tuesday, on Monday, I did a show, another YouTube show, and one of the people commented in who I had done a show with many months prior. They said, "Oh yeah, something happened to me after I interviewed you." I was like, "Okay, that's weird." So it's look. There's the pioneers in this subject, right? Like Jim Moseley and Tim Beckley, for instance, right? And even John Keel to some extent. They used to include that phrase, "You have been warned," right, in some of their literature. And it became apparent that it was rather tongue-in-cheek, statement for getting too close to the truth or the infamous Men in Black. But I think in their hearts, they're also trying to be honest with the reader that yes, you should approach this subject with extreme caution, especially since we don't know what it is that we're dealing with.
Oh, absolutely, and you can't scare me because, I've had some
Good.
pretty crazy shit, you know? And not to mention, like, I went through this high school stage where I went to the wrong side of witchcraft and decided to do
Mm,
some weird, things. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I knew what I was doing, but why would I be doing that?
mm,
You know what I mean? And I did it, and I added a shadow figure to the collection, and this one was not nice. So, you know, I
mm.
um, I expect strange things to happen. It's been kind of a strange spell here of a dry spell of strange things besides the spirit in the house, which is she's chill. She's not, problematic, but I haven't had like since I moved to Baltimore, nothing has happened. It's so strange for
Hmm.
like everything just to be so chill on the paranormal front.
That's
But
good. That's good.
I know, but you know what I mean. Like it kind of
Uh
like ebbs
huh.
and flows, right?
That's
So
right. Yep. It's
like
very cyclical.
Mhm, and I wonder what that is, like Like, I'm in a really
I
good spot here, so maybe, like, mentally and so maybe they don't they're like the good ones are like, "Oh, you don't need my help," and the naughty ones are like, "Oh, she's unfuckwithable right now, so we'll just leave her," you know?
Hey, I think there is something to that argument, it's that again, it's that mindset, I think. It's that intention, right? Like, after cases, when I was investigating a lot of cases at one point, I had stuff follow me back home, and, it was very unnerving, and it wasn't until, and this gets into a different subject, but it wasn't until I kind of got right with my spirituality, so to speak, and that started to subside. And again, being in that right mindset, right? Having that positive mindset. And I had always heard, from other investigators, especially those who worked on more of the demonic type cases, you have to, they always used to say, you got to get right with God before you go on the case. And I never understood what that meant. Now I understand what that means. It means you have to be in the right frame of mind, because sometimes these forces, they will feed upon fear, they will feed upon that inner darkness that you have, and it'll just, like we talked about my childhood, and I think that's really what takes place in some of these more negative type hauntings. Again, it's all speculation, but it's something we have to consider, especially when you look at a lot of these case reports.
We have to speculate in this field a little bit, you know, we're
Right?
not gonna speculate and say these are all the answers, but there are patterns that cannot be ignored, you know, once it keeps happening the same way to people across the world that have never met, you have to say, like, "There's something here," and with I saw UFOs, um, the first time I was kind of, like, afraid of my stepdad, to be honest, and if his side of the family listens to this, they'd be like, "Oh, why?" Well, he was not a nice person all the time. So,
Mm,
going outside, sneaking outside at night to look at the stars and look for things in the sky, whatever I was looking for. I was looking for constellations, and I was a weirdo. I was expecting to see a spaceship because I just for some reason, I was a weird kid. There was gonna be a spaceship, obviously, coming to pick me up, you know? I felt like somebody was gonna come pick me up. It was super weird, but, something did show up, and it was
mm,
beautiful at first. But again, you go into this, like, space of just like, I feel like your energetic feelers are just, like, stretched out after that, and they're
mm,
seeing and perceiving more. It's almost like it's hypervigilant, you know? And it's also
mhm,
like, you know, if you've been through a lot of trauma, your adrenal system kicks in, and sometimes it never goes back to normal. So you're more
mm.
perceptive of things. Grandmaster, hello, you showed up in the chat. I love Grandmaster. I accidentally blocked him one time and didn't know it. It was super awkward, and I'm still sorry, but it was an accident. I
Of
will save your
course.
question. I will ask him this, but since we're talking, we're gonna skip in questions. Um, I you mentioned getting right with God, and this is an interesting thing.
Mhm,
And you're Christian, and this question I know it was later in the notes, but
mhm,
how does this affect? So for me, I was raised
mhm,
Catholic, and my grandma was a medium and did cards, and she definitely practiced a little, like, Santeria on the side. She did do weird things with eggs and candles, so but,
mm,
she was never God was her God, like, she would be like, "There's a demon in the hallway. I'm not afraid of you," you know, like,
mm,
"I've got" you know, "I Jesus," you know, she'd start rebuking him or it.
mhm,
And I just felt like when I was super close to God, the attacks were more, intense and more demonic feeling. And
mm,
I guess I don't know if everybody's supposed to be in a different faith or belief system or, some say religion, you know? When I
mhm.
finally encompassed the fact that, I was a witch is when they stopped messing with me, and then this one pastor, like, messaged me, and he's like, "Well, it's because they've got you now. The demons got you. They're not gonna mess with you now. They know you're theirs." And it's just I was
Wow.
like, "Yeah," but, like, I was just like, you know, I still fall into, like, the Our Father, like, if a demon's hanging trying to come around, you know, like, I go
Mm,
back to the you know, the old school Catholic
interesting.
prayers. I still
Uh-huh.
call Saint Michael, you know, like, it's one of those things where, like, it's habit, like, you just it's
Yeah.
that energy or that person or that being that you know is gonna have your back, and a lot of people that is God. But I remember, um, trying to scream like Jesus's name in some of these attacks, and then these astral attacks, or even these physical demonic attacks as a child, and it felt like
mm,
something was covering my mouth. So
mm.
what why does it work for some people and some people it doesn't work, you know?
Well,
I guess.
yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a confusing question, right? Because it's like, um, right, like you hear about all of these feel good stories, right? About like, since we're on top of Christianity, about being Christian and all that stuff, right? But what you don't hear is some of these horror stories, right? You don't hear about some of these struggles, and we can look at it from a whole bunch of different perspectives. You know, I was I wish I had a lot of these answers, but I don't. Again, I just think about other approaches, other perspectives, right? And like when I'm writing the book, I try not to give the reader all the answers, but just to encourage them to begin asking questions. When it comes to spirituality, it's a very personal journey, right? So I think what you encountered, although similar to maybe someone else, it's tailored to you. And a lot of the paranormal or supernatural events, whatever you want to refer to them as, they're tailored to individual people, right? So to answer that question, you might be the only one who can answer that question. Um, some people, some religious scholars might look at that and say, well, I don't know, like, the evil side wants to destroy humanity. So, if they're not giving you a fight, then they've already won, right? It's like, and then other people might say, well, if you're not struggling in your spirituality, then it means that you're not on the devil's radar, you know? Um, so maybe there's an aspect to that, perhaps. Maybe not. Maybe there's other forces at play, like internally, right? Like maybe it's not demonic that was keeping you from uttering, Jesus' name, for example, like, but maybe that was something psychologically, right? Like inside you or some sort of internal component. We don't know, right? Um, but again, I think it's healthy to ask these questions. And I always encourage people when they're trying to seek out a healthy church family, if that's what they're going to. And side note, if you want to become a Christian, it's a terrible hobby. Please don't get into it. Like only do it if you really are, motivated to do it and you really feel compelled to, right? Um, but it's a hard life, right? And but when you're looking for a church family, find one that allows you to ask these questions, right? That doesn't like force feed you this information, but allows that free thinking. Because again, it, it's meant to enhance your spiritual journey, to help guide your spiritual journey, whatever that journey is. But again, it's tailored to each individual person, I think. So short answer, I have no freaking clue. Long answer, there you go.
I was curious, about thoughts, because a lot of people shy away from talking about, like the beliefs, and
Yeah,
a lot of people like might be like, oh, well, of course you're gonna ask the Christian guy these questions, you're a witch. I'm not that person. I
right.
respect all belief systems, and I find the Bible has so many fascinating things in it and strange things in it.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Like you could you
absolutely.
could catalog the strange things in the Bible and write a spectrum part two, because of the thing, like, the book of Daniel. It's like, I always talk about it because it's just the one that stands
Mm,
out to me. Like, what in the world is
interesting.
going on with it? It's super weird, but I
Yeah,
had to ask because I was like, I wonder why, it just, like you said, it's almost like it's tailored to the person. So
yeah,
it's
yeah, and I think like Christian leaders especially need to be, they need to be aware of that, right? Because like I've had a lot of these conversations with people high up in the church, and I've even had experiencers write to me from the church. Um, and it's really, yeah, you can sense their struggle with it because not everything is answered about the mysteries of the earth, right? And I think that's okay, right? Like church leaders need to be aware that it may not be a simple topic that can be explained away in simple means, right? And if we're going to dismiss certain accounts and instantly put that blanket term of it being demonic, well, that's going to turn a lot of people off, right? And where are those people then going to seek counsel from? It's not going to be from the church then, because they're going to be burned by the church. They're going to seek it maybe in an unhealthy way. And that's how these cults, I think, form, right? You see a lot of this twisted thinking, like, and just extreme thinking, and especially in today's society. And it's really kind of like a shame. It's a shame to see that, especially when we're, again, from a human perspective, we always try to look at things in a black and white manner, good versus evil. Well, I like to bring up, and you brought up the book of Daniel. I like to bring up the book of Joshua in the Old Testament, right? There's one particular event that took place in there. And I love this event because it just illustrates perhaps what the phenomenon could be echoing as well. In this story, like Joshua was on this top of this mountain, and he's planning his attack, into this city of Jericho, and then he sees off to the side, he sees this guy just standing there, right, with a sword in his hand. And Joshua goes up to him and he goes, are you for us or our enemies? And the man replies, neither. I am part of the Lord's army. So what that tells me is that there are forces at play that may not have anything to do with us. They may just be neutral, but they may have an agenda that is outside of the realm of human logic. And so for us as human beings to look at everything from a perspective of human thinking, I think that's a disservice to the field, because especially to this research, because it may not operate that way. And like you look at like a lot of the reports in the news media today with all these UAP videos surfacing, right? And all these government bodies like talking about this and saying we don't know what it is, but we know something is there. Well, that doesn't surprise me, because again, they're looking at it as, is this an enemy or is this an ally? Well, maybe it's neither. So I just try to encourage people to think along those lines sometimes. It may need
Yeah.
us, but it may not be in the way we hoped or wished.
Yes, yes, yes. That makes a lot of sense. And we'll find these encounters in all sorts of spiritual texts from all over the world, going all the way back to recorded human history. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting. These entities show up and we don't know what they are. That definitely brings an element of ontological shock for some people. I was
Mhm.
told my whole life, it was this way, like there was, this belief system, this God has my back, like whatever God you may have, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden this other thing comes and it doesn't fit into what I've learned my whole life, or what the stories have told me passed on through generations.
Yeah.
And it's just, how have you had any sort of like ontological shock period yourself where you're just like, what is going on? Like, I don't like, because I've gotten to points myself, I'm not going to ask you a tough question without giving a little, where I don't even believe in anything sometimes. I'm like, I don't even know
Mm.
anymore. Like, there's just so many different things. Like, and
Yeah.
so, but some people, this is very serious because this is a person that, has this faith and it's rocked by this experience for better or worse, right?
Yeah.
So, have you ever gone through any period like that? And I'm only asking because I have a big heart for experiencers, and I get contacted by a lot of people that, um, they are kind of having like they're questioning now, and where they've never
Mm.
questioned before because they've had this strange experience. So, I kind of try to give people some relatability from people that like study this.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I certainly have. I started questioning this, especially when I was coming back to my faith. You know, um, my study in the in this subject was looked at as rather contradictory. And I had a lot of people ask me that question, like, "Hey, don't you think this challenges your belief system, calling yourself a Christian? Like, how can you pursue this and also pursue Christianity?" And I had to ask that tough question to myself, like, yeah, is this contradictory? Am I sounding like a hypocrite here? And so what I do with a lot of tough answers, well, a lot of tough questions, again, from a spiritual background, is I just go in a prayer, right? Like, okay, God, like, what do you want me to do with this, right? You've obviously piqued my curiosity in this subject, but you've also, helped me kind of value what you're presenting and what you're showing me, and this quote unquote wisdom that you're giving me, right? But what do you want me to do with this? And the answer that I was kind of led to believe was, why do you have to separate them? You know, and again, having that good network of people that you can kind of bounce ideas off of certainly helps. I remember meeting this one minister in training, and he told me, he said, the Bible is filled with supernatural stuff. He said, so God's meeting you where you are, and there's a lot of people who want to share stories with you. If there's nobody according to him, there's nobody in the Christian field that's doing this. So he said, like, just see where it leads you. I was like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I will, and just see where it leads me. And I've had some really interesting conversations with people. But again, I don't push my ideals on somebody else because, like I said before, right, the spiritual journey is a very personal one. And what I'm going through is way different from what someone else is going through. So if I have like advice or insight that I can share with them, I'm happy to, but I'm not going to, do what other people did to me when I was a kid. Let me talk to you about Jesus. Please, I don't want to. There's nothing worse than unsolicited advice, right? And so a lot of times I think people, especially those in religious circles, overstep their boundaries, and they think that, their job is to spread the gospel. Well, you have to do that respectfully, of course, because there's a lot of people, like such as yourself, right? Who you have different belief systems, and that's great. I think that's awesome. I think having everybody come together with all these different belief systems and just kind of learning from one another, just like in the paranormal community, the UFO communities, right? Like, we need to learn from everybody, and we need to kind of like come together, right? Because this is a mystery. This is a human mystery. And if we're just busy fighting amongst each other, right? And just kind of like going at each other's throats because someone else has a different viewpoint than someone else, well, that's it's not going to get us anywhere, right? It's just going to make more enemies. So that's why I try to present questions, not answers, but just questions, and encourage that thought process, that thinking process, because I think that's important no matter what the field is.
It really is, and that's a lot, to be honest, pastors need to be more open-minded because people are afraid at sometimes to talk about, strange experiences that seem like they're out of the realm of biblical text when I bet you can find anything in the Bible, like if you look
Yeah,
hard enough. So, it's just one of those things where I like having, Christian people on too that study uh, the strange things in their religion and are open to that because I myself, I have friends coming to me that are just definitely like no, like I don't know if I believe in God after this experience kind of thing. So it's scary
yeah,
because losing your faith is very scary and it puts you in a very vulnerable and alone place. And that could kick up other activity in the house too, like poltergeist stuff. So
oh, sure.
I have a question. Do you study a lot of because I have a question in the chat from Grandmaster, and do you study a lot of the mechanisms of how UFOs work, or is this not the question for you?
Yeah, no, sorry,
He's
Grandmaster.
asked, how do
Yeah,
you think UFOs work? Electromagnetic, kinetic force field manipulation. And if you don't think that, get a digital magnetic levitation module. Hey, that I don't know that this is a Justin question, Grandmaster. He's not into like the mechanisms of the UFOs, just like the encounters, right?
yeah, yes,
Not to like
sorry.
answer it for you, but just I read his book, so he doesn't talk about a lot of the technical stuff when it comes to like the nuts and bolts UFO stuff. But
Yeah,
that it's a great
right.
question.
Absolutely. And Grandmaster, you probably heard of Bob Lazar. I think that's a good starting point. If I think a lot of what he talks about does make sense. Again, from a layman's perspective, right? I'm not a scientist, so I don't know for certain, but that would be my best advice is to kind of go down, see what
Yeah,
his
Bob's
research is.
yep, Bob's definitely onto some stuff. A lot of what he said, people were starting to be like, "Oh, well, that's right," later on. But back to the book and some terms that you use, because these are terms that not everybody has heard before, and I think
Mhm.
that it's nice to have different descriptors of things for these sorts of experiences.
Mhm.
What is theophany, and how does it apply to the spectrum? And just bringing it back to the spectrum of paranormal things that people
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into all sorts of, spiritual topics tonight, right? It's a Tuesday
I know,
sermon.
I know. I have to I go right in, like I feel like I like those deep, strange conversations. Like I just, when else am I gonna get a
Yeah.
chance to ask you at next year's Mystery of Space and Sky, At the
Yeah.
end of
No, no, I love it. I love it, because again, there's a lot of really interesting um, concepts, right? Again, from my perspective, like Christian Bible, that I think can apply to the paranormal. And one of these is theophany, right? It's this visible well, theophany in theological terms is this visible manifestation of deity to humankind. For example, when God appeared in the Bible, he appeared in various forms that could be physically observed, such as like burning bushes or like a pillar of clouds or fire or storm. And God frequently would take on the shape of angels or several angels, right? Before later taking on the human form of Jesus. So, and look at how like Jesus spoke to his disciples too, right? He opted for parables instead of direct answers to questions, which I think serve to illustrate these theological principles that we as human beings could better grasp. So let's take this a step further, right? And let's look at, for example, the famous psychic and remote viewer Ingo Swann, right? He brought up a related point in his book, Penetration. He learned that when like remote viewers perceived something that they didn't understand, they tend to explain it in ways that made sense to them. And Swan referred to this as an analytical overlay, or the ability of the mind to overlay something unknown and unrecognized, unfamiliar, with this mental image that is recognized. And I think people do this all the time, right? With like their thinking. They basically try to make sense of the chaos. And I think we can apply theophany to, I think, the paranormal, um, because I think it might just be taking on various forms and shapes for us to perceive, for us to see. Maybe that's not the truest form, right? Maybe that's just a way for us to recognize it. Because again, you look at like how this phenomenon has changed over time. I mean, just look at like the shape of the UFO, right? In the 1800s, right, there was like this airship, and then it evolved to flying discs, right? And then it evolved again and then again, and now it's just like these balls of light, right? So it's like, even though all of this may have existed all at the same time, it's just the common mindset, I think, it reflects our views in society and what we understand. So like, say like you take like a cell phone and you go back to like the 1700s, they're not going to know what a cell phone is. They're going to think that's something else based on their own preconceived notions and their own perspectives. So I think this concept of theophany can be applied to this realm. Um, what it is we see may not be what it is truly. So that's how I kind of like look at it. And I think, you know, when we're interviewing witnesses, we need to be careful not to get so caught up with the experience itself. We need to look at, okay, how did that experience kind of reshape their thinking, or what lasting effect did it have on them, psychologically, physiologically, biologically. Like, so um, that's kind of where I'm with in terms of like my research, just looking at things differently, a different perception, so to speak.
That's great. Yeah, a lot of people that have experiences like you. So you have an experience, you see a spirit in your house, or a men in black, maybe, or just, oh my gosh, in your book, there's these weird people. They're like
Oh
human, but they're
yes.
doing a horrible job at being human. It's like putting on a bad human costume, right? So,
Oh
oh, we
yeah.
got a nice comment from Juan. Justin is my favorite paranormal investigator. Is this your friend, or did you pay him to say this? I'm just kidding. I'm just
Yeah,
teasing.
I'll Venmo you after the show, Juan. So he's no one side note. Juan runs a great podcast called the MRP show, and
Oh, I'll have to check it out.
he's interviewed witches in the past. So
Oh, I'm a space
I
witch,
think
Juan. So, let's talk.
you guys should talk. It's an incredible show. I love it. It was one of the first shows that interviewed me, so he's always followed
That's
me and
awesome.
supported me. So there you go.
Well, you're a great talk to, and I love your presentation. Like you came on stage at Mysteries of Earth and Sky. Oh my gosh, Mysteries of Space and Sky. I just keep changing it every time I say it, and
Right.
I wrote it down because I keep doing that. It's the ADHD and just like I can't read sometimes. So, um,
The mysteries of skydiving, the
yeah,
mysteries of
Mysteries of the
seeing
Sky, of deep space. What?
of the
So,
deep underwater sea.
but yeah, it's it's just one of those things, like it's just so freaking weird. All of it's so weird, in the best way possible, because where would we it'd be life would be so boring if none
Oh
of this
yeah.
happened. I mean, I don't want to say that because some people have really had traumatic, and I've had ranging from it's an angel, to it's a goddess, to oh, it's
Mhm.
Thor. No, I'm not lucky
Yeah,
enough to be
it's
visited by Thor, but or like it could be very terrifying for people, or it could be beautiful. So that's all I'm trying to say is, but for me, it's like you can't imagine your life without strange things happening after a while. Um,
mhm,
I do have a question, because what caught me with your presentation
mhm,
was the whole Men in Black situation, because we hear about it, obviously the movie, people know about the movie, but these were around long before that. These guys would just show up. Who
mhm,
are the Men in Black in your experience? How did you, because I feel like that's kind of something that stuck out, because I've heard people encounter them, but you
mhm.
almost study these non-human intelligences and these Men in Black. So, who are they, and what are they like?
Yeah, so the Men in Black are equally fascinating and equally as annoying, in my opinion. But when we hear that term, right, tossed around in popular culture, most people instantly jump to Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones, right? That film franchise, right? And these black clad individuals that are running around with their neuralizers trying to, take away, UFO witnesses and all that stuff. But in reality, I think it's a lot more complex than that. And what what I think is going on with all the reports that I've either received or researched is that these MIB encounters, or strange people encounters, or non-human intelligences or non-human entities, uh, they have unusual um, traits about them, and I think that is the common thread. They have these unusual mannerisms or appearances that either scare the bejesus out of people or leave them quite disturbed by it all. And it's one that often trails the UFO experience, which is why it's been closely associated with UFOs. But it's not just limited to UFOs. It can also surface, because of paranormal experiences, even cryptic cases. So, but I like it because it's interesting, it's different. Not a lot of people are studying this. I just happened to, go into like a couple of these, and again, now a lot of my research tends to be, centered around that, and I think a lot of times people come to me with their weird, strange people encounters. It's again, what's the modus operandi with these MIB? Maybe it's unknown as far as I'm concerned, but it seems to have like a dual purpose, right? Either information extraction or information suppression, or again, it would seem that way. Now, most have linked them to like military or government entities, but when you look at the conduct, when you look at the mannerisms of these people, that may not be the case. They may not be human at all. I know that sounds rather far fetched, but this is a possibility we got to consider. especially when you look at some of their traits. Sometimes they can read minds. Sometimes the way that they speak, just it can't be done. I interviewed a guy. I think he was from British Columbia recently, just a few months ago, prior to the conference, and he told me about a really interesting encounter that he had, where he and his father, they filmed these UFOs in the sky, and not they didn't go out one night attempting to film UFOs. They were trying to film like a meteor shower up in Canada, and they just happened to catch a UFO, and the object comes into view, and he catches it on camera, and then it comes back the other way, and as it's coming back the other way, it actually cuts power to the camera. Now, this gentleman, he had his camera plugged into the wall inside the kitchen, inside the house. He's out on the porch, and it didn't kick off power to the kitchen or the house. It was just to the camera. And as soon as it went out of view, camera turned back on again. Well, anyways, the next day he was en route to, I don't know, like the supermarket or some sort of store, and these two guys come up to him and they asked him about what he filmed last night. Well, now he didn't share that with anybody. So how did they know? Um, that's bizarre, right? And then he explained when they spoke, their lips didn't line up with the audio that was coming out of their mouth. It was almost like a poorly dubbed foreign film. So how do you do that? Uh, that's creepy stuff. And then these guys went on their way, and they disappeared. He followed them, and they just disappeared around a corner. So this is what I'm talking about. These strange people encounters. There was one, the Shane Sovar case up in Niagara Falls, where they actually caught these two guys on camera entering the lobby of a hotel that Shane worked at. He wasn't working that day when they showed up, but they interrogated some of his employees. And it's a very kind of like a viral video now that's circulated on the internet, but there's a lot of misinformation with that. I write about that case specifically in my book, and I look at a lot of these aspects, these really peculiar, strange people encounters. I think it's going on a lot more than we care to admit. But again, if we put that Men in Black, moniker on it, then it creates the stereotype. And if you ask people, have you ever had a Men in Black encounter? They're going to think about that. Did I run into Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones? No. But they could have had a strange people encounter that is very similar in nature. So I've started asking people about that. Have you had an unusual experience with somebody that stood out to you as odd, and not just people that you see, every day, right? There's a lot of odd people out there, but I
I mean,
mean,
I lived in Scottsdale, so I've seen a lot of
yeah,
strange people.
yeah, yeah. So, but you never know. I mean, you just get a lot of these. Well, I'm getting a lot of these reports because I'm asking these questions,
Yeah,
and I just find it fascinating.
it really is. Gosh, you guys have to read his book. It's just weird. I don't even like. Not a lot weirds me out, but people weird me out, and people that like pretend to be people that are not people.
Mm,
Just like
yeah,
the way that they look sometimes is just. I feel like I would be like all in their face. I mean, because I'm also studying it, but not everybody's gonna think that. They're just gonna be like, "Oh, somebody's
right.
talking to me. Wait, what's wrong with your face? You don't look human." Or, "Why is your voice?" Imagine if somebody's just talking to you and we're going about our business, we're not looking at their mouth, so we don't realize the voice is
Hmm.
not syncing up or something weird like that. But have you had one? Have you had a strange human or
Yeah.
experience?
No, no, I have not had a definitive experience that I would say, yeah, that's an MIB or that's a non-human, entity. I've had some weird experiences that I've logged. Anytime I have an experience, I log it, right? I write it down. And I encourage anybody listening or watching the show tonight, if you have a strange event, please, please, please write down all the details of the event right after it happens or as soon as possible, because you're going to forget some things. And I've had some really disturbing experiences, but I don't know what it was. It's that's how this that's how the phenomenon operates. It always gets you to second guess things, right? You may have had a strange experience, but it leaves that little bit of doubt where you're like, did I really just see that? Like, was that a full-bodied apparition right there? No, that's impossible. And again, it's our worldview that comes into play, and it kind of talks us out of it. I've had strange experiences, especially when diving into this topic. I remember when I was working on my very first presentation that I delivered for this these two people who are setting up an event in October many years ago. To in line with Halloween and stuff. And they had a lot of people from like ghost hunters and stuff talking, but it was like every week it was a different speaker, right? And I was the first one. And I remember working on that presentation. I'd never given a presentation on the Men in Black before. And as I was working on that presentation, um, again, it's one of those things, and it sounds crazy, but I heard this very loud, um, like a mechanical or electronic beep. And okay, sure, it could be like anything, right? It could be like the AC, it could be, I don't know, some unit I had in my basement. But it happened like where I was in the dining room and I was working on it. And I heard it like right next to the dining room. There was a little space at in that particular house that I lived in. And it came from there. It was very loud. And it was just once, it was just this loud beep. And I was like, what the heck was that? And I thought it was like, oh, maybe it was my AC unit upstairs. And I went upstairs, but that wasn't on. And I thought, okay, well, the only other electronic device is in the basement. I had a dehumidifier unit. Like, was it that? Like an alert tone or something? So I went to the basement, checked that out. Now it was running fine. I've never heard that type of sound before. It was very unusual. Well, anyways, I thought nothing of it, and I just grabbed my laptop and I was like, all right, whatever. I'm just going to sit in another part of the house, and I'm working. And sure enough, I heard it again in a different area, but again, right next to me. It was almost like closer. And I was like, okay, this is weird. Like, is something trying to deter me from finishing this? But anyways, the reason I bring this up is after I gave the presentation, 2 weeks later, the event organizers, they had a or strange person encounter that looked very similar to a stereotypical MIB. And they saw this gentleman approach them, but the way that he like traveled, it was like they're talking with each other. They look over, they see this gentleman that looks like an MIB across the street. They think, oh, that's weird. They turn to each other and say, that's really strange. They look, now he's right next to them. And they're like, what the heck was that? They look, now he's completely down another street. Then they're like, what the heck? They come back. Now he's in front of the venue and he's peering his head into the front entrance, looking around. And then he leaves and goes down the street. And they caught sight of him and they said he was wearing dark sunglasses. And this is at night, mind you. He's very pale in complexion. I think he may have been wearing a fedora, maybe like a trench coat, but he was wearing jeans. They thought, wow, this is weird. And prior to me giving this lecture, they had never had a Men in Black experience ever. Now, was he there for me? Possibly, but he was too late. What I find interesting is that the people speaking at that exact time, one of those speakers has had direct encounters with what I would refer to as MIB. But he called them, he had a code name, him and his group of friends, they called him Beastie Boys, right? And I write about this in the book, but it was really strange. Was he there for them? Was he just kind of like, I don't know, trying to pick up information in the area? I don't know. It's all these questions. But to answer your question, have I had a direct experience? No, but people around me have. And it seems like that could be how this works. I don't know. Maybe you'll have an experience after we do this interview. If you do, tell me.
Oh, I've had I kind of want a Men in Black experience because I kind of just want to like get in their face and steal their sunglasses. Because if you're not human, what are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna call the police?
Right.
Like,
Well,
but hopefully you're not CIA though, because I just stole the CIA. I assaulted a government worker if that's the case. But
well, you know what? So on that note, I've had a lot of people say to me, look, if there's an MIB that confronts me, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to snap a photo. I'm going to, be ready for them, ready to rock. But that's not how this works. It seems
No,
like
you
when
freeze.
these, you got it, when these forces are at play, I think they, again, just speculation, but they might have more of a control over us and our reaction, our thinking than we like to admit. Colonel John Alexander, who, I know he's a controversial figure in a lot of ufology, right? But I think he's right on the money when he refers to this as a precognitive sentient intelligence, right? It's always precognitive in the sense that it anticipates our moves before we even make them. And if you're having a true supernatural metaphysical experience, it is going to know how you're going to respond to certain stimulus. So it's going to react before you react.
It's like,
That's
this
scary,
broad's
right?
gonna try and steal my glasses. Never mind.
Right. Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not gonna steal your glasses, Men in Black. Wink, wink.
Right. Like, for
But no,
example,
people
that,
think they're gonna act a certain way. Like, I would have had my
yeah,
DSLR out. No, you wouldn't. You'd be like, "What the heck is that?" And by the time
right.
it processed, it'd be gone.
You got it. And even if you do try to take a picture, how many times do paranormal investigators speak about this? The camera will lock up. Or when they try to take a picture of a UFO, the camera will malfunction. Nothing will show up.
Right.
Um, that's how this works. This is a very elusive force. Um, so, hey, if you can get a photo, great. If you can take a pair of sunglasses, great. And it's funny because those sunglasses, right? I talked about this during my
Yep,
presentation.
I was gonna ask you about that next.
That was the strangest thing. I mean, there was, I was getting ready to leave to go to my day job in the one morning, and normally I would take the train when I worked up around the New York City area, and on this particular occasion, excuse me, I decided to drive up. But there, in the front seat, it's a pair of dark sunglasses, a pair of black sunglasses. I wish I had them. I could show you, but it's um, wow, what the heck? What was this? And I
Mhm.
have no idea how they got there. I messaged everybody who I knew sat in my car within the last few months. And I'm very meticulous about keeping details and notes and being very organized. And I don't know how this got there. I lock my car door every night. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. Was it a calling card from MIB? I don't know. I still have the sunglasses. I just don't have them on my desk to show
You
you.
don't
But
wear them? Have you put them on?
I have yeah, 'cause I did put them on because I thought, what would be interesting? Maybe there's like some sort of like, I don't know, hidden camera inside, right? But
Yeah.
wishful think. No, they're just a standard pair of Foster and Grant sunglasses. I don't wear Foster and Grant sunglasses, and
So
no
you're
one
saying
else
that
I know
MIB don't
does.
have good taste. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, or maybe they just don't have the budget.
They're on the government budget, so they can't.
Right. I mean, but they fit me. I could wear them. I maybe I'm too afraid to wear them. I have them in a case, off to the side as kind of like a specimen, but
You're just like, "What in the world?" Yeah, that would definitely be strange.
it's very, very
I've
strange.
had people, like, get, like, crystals left that they don't like they didn't buy it, so
Hmm.
so this is a little more along, like, the witchy woo crystal witch side, but, I've met people that have had crystals appear, and I've had
Hmm.
crystals, like, disappear from my nightstand before, um,
Whoa.
and I'm, like, looking everywhere for it. This is before kids. Kids do weird things, like, I joke that my youngest has a black hole in his hand. If he touches something, it's gonna get lost, and we're never gonna find it.
Mm.
He had us looking in a drain pipe one time for keys that he said that he had. That's what we
Oh
get for
my
listening
god.
to a two-year-old, but he seemed confident that he put them in the pipe, and then we're riding the scooter down the road, and he's like, "Oh, no, they fell in there, and it was another storm pipe." I'm like, You've never even been out here, never mind." But yeah, so it was before kids, so, yeah, things like crystals would disappear, and then they'd, like, just be there, I'm like, "I
Yeah.
just looked there, and I looked under there, and I looked in the bed," everywhere. So, I haven't had cool sunglasses, but I've had rocks, disappear and appear.
Hey, look, this is an aspect of of these experiences that I think again is overlooked is missing objects, or I should say disappearing objects and reappearing objects. I spoke about it in some of my presentation. There's this woman from New Zealand who I interviewed, and she was experiencing it virtually every day for several years. I think it was linked to her stressful mindset at the time, because now she still corresponds with me and gives me updates, and she says it doesn't happen anymore right now because she's in a really good state of mind, and it's when these experiences take place, and I stress this to your viewers, don't just be caught up with the experience. Write down your state of mind. Did you have a very happy day? Did you have a very stressful day, a sad day? What was going through your mind just before the experience took place? And then how did you feel after the experience took place? We got to look for some of these more subtle clues. That could be an indicator of why these things are taking place and possibly why certain people are magnets, so to speak. Um, I kind of gave it, another label because a lot of these terms, there are no terms for these things, so I just make them up. But I call this like a stress-induced psychokinetic discharge, or SIPD, right? Where it was like people, they would be really stressed out, and they would have this ability to affect objects, especially electronic objects. And I just find that so fascinating. My ex-wife was she was one of these individuals, and I saw it firsthand. And then I interviewed other people who had also had experiences with this, and it was just unbelievable. Like there was yeah, just unbelievable stuff. Like I think it happens a lot more again than we're
Well, the people that are like, "Oh, I
recognizing.
have bad luck. Things always break around me." Like, pay attention to that. Because
Absolutely,
when I was going through some stuff,
absolutely.
I felt like I couldn't get in a checkout line without, like, the cash register or their thing crashing. Like, I was just like, "Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, not again." And people are like, "Well, how many times does this happen?" I'm like, "No, I'm always stuck behind somebody that's paying with change, and I'm also and once I get there, the computer decides to freeze or do something stupid, and they're like, 'Oh, well, I don't know what happened.'" Like, it was just, it doesn't happen anymore. Either technology's gotten Priscilla proof or, again, state of mind. Like, I am happy. So so
Yeah,
and it's just it really does have to do with, I think, like, people's emotional states, and we've seen this over and over again with poltergeist cases, right?
yes,
So
yes. Mhm. Yeah, there has to be this connection. There's just too many case reports that I'm coming across personally, and that other people are writing about, that there has to be a link with this. But again, we're so caught up with this being an external thing. This could just be an extension of the human experience, which is, in my opinion, is just as impressive. It's just as fascinating. Or it could be a combination of both. So I don't know.
yeah, it's definitely fascinating, and more people are leaning that way, and I think it's super cute because and when you study spirituality, like, I was reading about different spiritualities since I could read, I'm not even joking.
Mm,
You realize that people have known this, and then we forgot about it. We
mhm,
oversimplified our existence to a point where if science doesn't show it, or my chosen book or my chosen religious manual doesn't show it, then it's not real, and we have to remember that
yeah.
we're literally interwoven within dimensions and energy, and that energy is sticky, and it's like, just the fact that you handed me a card in the book when I met you, it's
Mm,
almost like there's these filaments now. It's like the string theory almost,
mm,
so that's kind of like what I explain to people, especially mediums that talk to me that are kind of just starting to come into their experiences.
mhm,
I'm like, "Well," they're like, "Well, I don't know who the person was though. Nobody died in this house." They'll have like a spirit visitation or a dream visitation. And they'll be like, "But it
mhm,
was so real, and it was like I was getting details for this person," or, "This person wanted me I don't know who this person is, but I keep getting visions of them, or I see them in the house as a spirit." I'm like, "Well,
mm,
it literally could have been the cash register woman or operator handing you your change or your card or giving you your groceries, and you connected with them. and this spirit's been trying to get through to them, but has been waiting for that medium to come through. And I don't mean medium as like I'm a psychic medium. I mean like literally like a medium for energy and information to go through and be conducted through you, like a channel. And we always have these connections energetically everywhere we go, everything we touch. So, and that's just like what I was shown in like a vision before. Doing like a spiritual like a meditation journey, I was shown how kind of like energy sticky is the best way I could explain it. Like it sounds weird, like gum has the filaments, and
Yeah.
you hug somebody, and this is like your whole energetic body hugging them too. Your energy fields intertwine. You pull away, for better or worse. Who is it? Like you don't know, but you've
Yeah.
now made a connection, and
Yeah,
this
that's
could.
really fascinating.
And that's just what I was shown, and I've had other mentors
Right.
kind of, like, explain it similarly, but it's almost like spider webs. Spider webs are sticky,
Yeah.
but it's just we're all, like, filaments everywhere, so that's why I talk about feelers and filaments a lot when it comes to stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like, what was it, Rupert Sheldrake, right? When he talked about the morphic resonance, right? We talked
Yes,
about
yes,
like
very
this,
similar.
yeah, this ability to where like people pick up, he did it with like his phone call experiments, right? Where
Mhm.
when the phone was ringing, could people predict who it was before picking it up? And his research showed that yes, this is possible. Um, but it seems like that connection goes out and gets kind of like less like with actual physical distance, right? But it could be that there's this interwoven network, this neural network, so to speak, right? This consciousness thing that links us all together, and maybe we as a collective being, all these people, we have more power than we think, and maybe we need each other more than we think too. Instead of, but then
Mhm.
again,
I
what is this? This is
definitely.
crazy talk, right? We're living
No,
in a divided states of
no,
America now, so
no. If anybody's on my show, nothing's crazy, unless
yeah,
you're hurting somebody. All ideas are welcome. Um,
yeah,
Speaking of experiences, and
sure.
I really wanted to ask you, are there any experiences that just kind of like left you either like you
Mm.
couldn't sleep after it, you know, um, or just give sort of like haunted you? Like, is there any experience that you can talk about that has sort of just like shaken you, we've all had those happen where you're just like, "Damn, now I can't sleep because I heard this." And if that's happening, then what else is like you go down the rabbit
Yeah.
hole of crazy thoughts at 3 AM.
Yeah, I mean, they're all equally fascinating to me in one way or another. I mean, since so used to this now, like nothing really phases me. Nothing to the point where I'm extremely bothered by it or scared by it anymore. But there is one particular case that I wrote about in the Spectrum that many people have told me truly disturbs them, and that would be the Lawrence Miller case, involving like this very negative haunting that really destroyed him and his family, and it left with him with this emotional scarring that he's still trying to get over. In fact, it was such a traumatic experience that it practically fried the fear receptor in his brain, and left him with PTSD. According to what he told me, he went to see a medical professional after this, and it was really crazy. Quick synopsis. So this guy that I called Lawrence Miller, it's not his real name. Um, in some of my uh, or earlier interviews, I actually did talk with the Lawrence Miller. He has a podcast, and he came out during his show and he said, "Hey, that's me, audience." But anyways, he took a job in Columbia, South Carolina, and he relocated his whole family from Houston, Texas. This was, I think, in the spring of 2008. Yeah, and when he went to this new house, things took a turn for the worse, like almost immediately. These unusual occurrences quickly escalated into full-blown sightings of like these demonic imp-like creatures that tormented Lawrence and his wife. Not his child, though, not his daughter, but just him and his wife on like a daily basis. And after 2.5 years of living there, he and his family, they retreated back to Texas. And that was it. He never had any experiences after that. But this lingering PTSD after the incident, especially on the last night that he was there, where these things tried to kill him. You know, they, I know this sounds like far fetched, but this is what he told me. And he said that one of these creatures, he said that there were two creatures in particular. One of them was like this impish creature, and this other one was kind of like this skeletal creature. And he said, I think like the impish creature like jumped on him while he was trying to sleep, and basically like sat on him and just tried to like suffocate him. And he was punching this thing, and he felt his fist make contact with this entity. So it was a very solid, very real thing. And he said if it was his cat, he would have killed it because of the force that he was doing. If it was him, he would have had the effects, right? He was making contact with something, and that was it. That was the last straw. But these things, it was a buildup of activity, and I originally heard from him. He was an avid reader of my site of paranormal.org. And, when I was posting articles up there, I would I would encourage people to write to me, and if they had something that they would want to contribute. And one of the things he expressed interest in was writing a topic for the site. So I thought, okay, sure. What's it going to be about? He said, it's about living in a haunted house, um, and that had taken place not too long after he connected with me. So he sent me a draft of his experience, and it focused more on dealing with the post traumatic effects, not necessarily going into greater detail with the experience. But I thought that was rather intriguing, so I asked him if I could interview him more in depth about it. And when I did speak with him, and he was extremely reluctant at first, but when I was talking with him, you could hear it in the tone of his voice. He was struggling with this because he he couldn't believe it happened, um, and he had lived there. And what's interesting is the uh the prior owners, like, it seemed like nobody lived there for more than like a year. He and his family lived there the longest. So it's a sad tale, and when people read the description of that in the spectrum, they're really shaken up by it, because it's unlike anything else you've encountered before. It's unlike anything else Hollywood has portrayed, and but this is real. And yeah, so that disturbed a lot of people. I had him speak to a group of my friends then too, because I thought it was important that people hear firsthand from the source. And when they heard him share his experience, they were even more disturbed by it. So I was like, well, there you go. So it's
Well,
not
yeah,
fun living in a haunted house.
no, when you hear it from the person too, you see, especially with PTSD people of all sorts of reasons for having it, they
Hmm.
get that look like they're there again when they're telling you the
Yeah.
story.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of the ones where I was just like, because um I had a lot of, I would call them demonic attacks when I was younger, and then sometimes it was like grays, sometimes it was demons. It was just
Mm.
the same energy, like scary. Well, one was scary because I looked like a monster, and one was scary because it was a demon. But when I was reading that, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I can't imagine going through that with my family. Um,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have this beautiful family, like, and then something like that happens, and either like sometimes like only one person is experiencing it, so then the spouse thinks they're going crazy, and that destroys them. Um,
Yeah.
so it's just it has like a very kind of like dark side to these experiences. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, when I read that one, it was one of the ones where I was just like up, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that poor guy.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's important because it just shows the reality of it, right? Like, how many people say like, "Oh, I wish I was abducted by aliens," or "I wish I lived in a haunted house." But then when you actually meet somebody who's undergone these circumstances,
Mhm.
like, no, it's not fun,
No.
you know. So,
No, you
but it
joke about
happens.
it. Like, I joke about it
Yeah.
because that's like my sixth sense of humor. Like, that's everybody has coping. Mine is humor, right? So, but yeah, there's no way I would want to go back and relive some of those experiences or live in some of
Hmm.
those places. or do some of the stupid crap I did, messing around with, the darker side of like magic, I guess, and entities that, why, like, what the hell is wrong with me? But, but,
Well, hey,
thank goodness
that's
I'm
how
a
you
good
learn,
guy
right?
now. Yeah, yeah, that's how you learn. That you want demons, that's how you get demons. But so flipping the coin, what is like the most beautiful experience that you've had with the paranormal? Has there been anything that has felt, deeply spiritual or beautiful that you'd be willing to share? Like, like some people talk about these like angel or entity visitations where the best word we have for it is angelic,
Yeah.
have you had anything like that happen or heard of any stories like that where somebody's just been, changed for the better afterwards, or it really like just like changed the way they thought about things in a positive way?
Yeah, I have had some of those experiences take place. You know, out of respect to those individuals who it involved with, I won't go into great detail, but it was, you know, yeah, it's really interesting, especially like when you have those experiences that answer some personal questions that you have, right? Like, or that reveals something that you never thought about before, or confirm something that like, yeah, in fact, there is something else beyond this reality. When it's one of those types of experiences, I think that's eh, those are the ones that it doesn't make me afraid. It makes me smile, and I think a lot of times these things are taking place um, for someone else. Like, so, you know, to your viewers, like, if you have an experience and it doesn't make any sense, don't instantly assume that it's meant for you. It could be like Priscilla was talking about earlier, right? Like it could be that you are the medium, or you're the go-between to deliver a particular message. And some of these experiences, like I had, you know, certain events take place where I'm like, what the heck was that? And then I share it with one of my friends who I think it applied to, and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that was, you know, her deceased mother coming through. Um, who I had interviewed, ironically, about a UFO experience that she had had way back when, and a strange people experience. And then she passed over to the other side, and then yeah, she had some interesting messages. It seems for all of us friends of her daughter. So it's
Wow,
interesting stuff.
that's
Yeah,
beautiful. I love stuff like that too because we get caught up on like, give me the spooky stuff, give me the creepy stuff.
yeah.
Um, you're allowed to say I was abducted by aliens and they did horrible things to me, but the second you start saying I was abducted by light beings and they started healing me or they started giving me energy work or whatever,
Mhm,
people start rolling their eyes, or angel visitations,
mhm,
I still think that there's angels. I mean, like maybe that's just my way to describe these beings that I've experienced, but it's definitely
mm,
beautiful. Like I don't, and then I'm like, well, they didn't have wings, but it just felt like what their stereotypical angel would feel like, I would imagine, beautiful,
mhm,
helpful,
mhm,
supportive in times of grief. I had a visitation after my brother passed in 2014, and my only brother, and it was I was a hot mess. It was a beautiful experience.
mm,
I was a hot mess in a whole different, like, this, like, because they weren't like, it was weird,
mm,
and I was working at a Christian-owned salon at the time, and
mm,
I remember telling, the owner and his son, and they were like, "Well, yeah, like, that maybe that's just," and this was kinda like the in between stage where I was like, a Christian witch. I know that sounds horrible. I got messages about that last time I said that too, so don't come at me. I was working, like there's magic in the Bible, you just gotta reread it from
yeah,
a different, lens. But,
mhm,
at the time, I was in between, like, going towards, like, my witchy side and then, like, still loving the whole thought, maybe just because I was brought up Catholic, loving the whole, um, almost like the simplicity of having, like, you have God and you have Jesus and you have this, and then you dive in and you're like, it's not that simple. But just the thought of just like knowing for sure something has your back, that was very like alluring to me. Um, when you deal with paganism, there's all these different gods and goddesses that you're trying to work with and energy streams and people, beings. But that thing to me showed, whatever it was. At the time, I only had the word angel for it. I hadn't delved on the whole light being, and and then I started reading about light beings. I'm like, well, that's actually what I've been seeing, but because I've never seen a being with wings, kind of thing, unless I was dreaming it. And that might be my mind just making sense of, like you said earlier, like, what is it? It's giving off its energy. It appears as it is, but your mind makes it tailored to what you'll understand. So but yeah, I remember I was a hot mess because I was like, "Wait, what is going on?" Like, I've seen aliens, angels, like, what is going on? Like, what is it? And luckily they were kind of like talking about it to me, and it it made me feel less crazy because they were like, "Well, yeah, people have this stuff happen," like whereas in Catholic school, if I mentioned like, "Hey, I saw a light in the sky," it was automatic, like, "God doesn't do that, you're a liar," like, go say 10 Hail Marys, whatever. So, but yeah, it's just the good experiences almost can be confusing as well, especially when you're like a middle place between like faiths and what not faiths, but I guess religious choices, or what do you believe in,
Yeah.
we're all walking that fine line and something can push us one way or another. And it
Well,
was
that's
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's why these things, sometimes these events are just meant to be experienced. They're not meant to be explained. You know, and a lot of time, we try to make sense of it. We try to apply this. Well, what's the meaning? What's the reason? We
What
try to
category are you in?
what
Like
kind of
what?
yeah, exactly. Just enjoy it for what it is.
Mhm.
Don't try to worry about
Yep.
all that other stuff. Just
Yep.
experience it.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of when people run into trouble, they try to like label everything and categorize everything. And it's just not always super easy to do that because, like you said, maybe it's not supposed to do that, and maybe that experience was just for you. Like people have
Yeah,
experiences, like you were saying earlier, like out of respect to people that had them. Sometimes the most beautiful experiences we don't want to share because they've been
yeah.
for you in a time that you needed it, and it
Mhm.
was on. And then sometimes like you get that feeling like, no, this is for you. Like don't talk about it. Like it's for you. It's almost like out of reverence for the experience that you don't go running your mouth about it or writing it down to everybody. I have kept you past the hour. I'm sorry.
No,
Um,
it's
you
great.
know, I think I had two more questions.
Yeah,
Um, and one of them is revolving dream time. Um,
yeah.
you know, people experience the dream time as an alternate reality in some cases, depending on your belief system. And I've always
Mhm.
had the weight where you're like I am of the camp that you're traveling in your sleep and you're working and you're doing all this stuff, and I understand there's dreams where it's like, yeah, I dreamt about, I don't know, buying some seafood at the supermarket because what I did, or that's what I need to do. Like there's the logical dreams, but then there's the ones where you feel like you're somewhere else. But people have
Mm.
also had visitations, right, from strange people
Yeah.
or non-human intelligences or even deities or,
Mhm.
in dreams. So what is your take on the whole dream visitation phenomena?
Well, I mean, from a, there's a, all right, like, it's tough to say, right? Because how do you know it wasn't just a dream, right? Or it could be that it was an experience, right? That just happened during the dream state. A lot of those experiences that people share with me kind of blur those lines. I try to not focus a whole lot of time to dreams because, again, I'm not a dream interpreter, but I'd like to, excuse me, I like to focus on those that take place during the waking state. But I will still listen to those experiences, and especially with like alien abductees, right? They have these really interesting experiences where,
Oh, I think we froze.
uh-oh, am I
Oh,
back?
see, you're not allowed to talk about alien abduction dream experiences,
Oh,
apparently. You
okay,
froze. No, you're back.
okay,
You froze for a
I'm
little
back.
bit. So
Weird,
good
interesting.
timing. Good
Okay,
timing.
well, okay, so let me
Knock it off
now
for
the weirdest begins. Yeah. Well, all right. So what's interesting is sometimes when I'm interviewing alien abductees, is they'll have an experience um, just as they're beginning to wind down for the night or about to go to sleep, but they haven't fully fallen asleep. And in those situations, it's really tough to tell, right? But when they know that they're fully awake and they have an experience, now I'm like, okay, what is this? There was one gentleman was talking with me about, what's this, January. It was in I think December. I was talking with him. Yeah, it was December last month, and he was experiencing some really interesting stuff throughout his life. And he said he knew when he was going to have one of these experiences because he would get this intense vibration, like a physical sensation in his body. And he told me, he's like, that's how I knew they were about to show up. And one particular day, he felt this vibration all day. And then when he went to go to prepare for bed and prepare to go to sleep, that's when all of a sudden he felt himself, the vibration got louder and more intense. And then the way he explained it, he was like traveling through, like, I think like a tunnel of light. And it was kind of like, I think the way he described it was kind of like 2001: A Space Odyssey, at the end scene. Sorry for anybody who hasn't seen it, but there's one particular scene where the traveler, the space traveler, he's having all these like blurs of light going through, and all of a sudden, this gentleman then is in this room where he said it was just pure bright white light, but he saw that there are other entities in the room that were a different like a different shade of white, if that makes sense. Like, it was like you had the room which was really bright, and then you had the entities which were a little bit darker, but he couldn't make out what they were. So he didn't know if they're alien grays or whatnot. But he said he felt like they were trying to tell him something, but they were conveying emotion. And it was just an overwhelming sense of all these different emotions that he couldn't understand what they were trying to say, but he thought that they were communicating. And then in an instant, he was then kicked out of that room and was back in through that light tunnel, and he's back in his bed, and now he's fully awake now, and he's like, what the heck? So again, what is that? He's had some other experiences. One with his brother one time where they were kids, and he floated up out of his bed, went through the wall, down down the hallway, and then he just fell at the end of the hallway. He just fell from floating, and then he looked over, and his brother had done the same thing. So they both floated out of their beds. What is that? Um, so, and then there's the other aspect, right? Like, a lot of times people say that, well, the deceased loved ones can also make communication with
Mhm.
us in the dream state, as I've experienced, and others have experienced as well.
Yeah.
So, is there something in this dream state? On a less scarier note, kind of like a funny note, I've had some strange dreams, but there's one in particular that I did write down, and it woke me up like uh, just before my alarm went off, and this was in 2021, so a little bit over a year ago in the summer, and I was in a tall building, and I was listening to, remember well, it's still around, Coast to Coast, right? With Art Bell, and I was listening to Art Bell, and as Art ended the show, the broadcast, with the words "Men in Black," in the dream, I looked out the window and I see a parked car with two MIB looking up at me. And in that moment, like, a third MIB seemed to morph out of the first or second one. Then they scattered in a startled surprise once I noticed them. And as they fled from their parked car, like, there was a glaring difference in their otherwise standard black attire, right? Their pants were bright red instead. And as I'm writing that, so that morning, I was like, I gotta write this down, right? So, like, as I'm writing it down, I had, I just happened to notice that I was wearing bright red shorts, and like, I wonder, like, and I hadn't consciously thought about this, right? In fact, like, I rarely wear red shorts, but on this particular day, I made the choice, but not thinking about the dream,
You're
I
not like,
wonder,
"Oh, I wanna match the Men in Black. That was a cute outfit."
right. I thought, okay, are they trying to, secretly attempt to recruit me? I don't know.
They're trying to give you
But it
fashion
was
advice.
fashion advice. Yeah, it was the strangest thing. But again, what are those dream states? A weird state.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. But
Yeah, for sure, and also those aliens were rude by dropping those brothers off in the middle of the hallway. Like, at least
yeah,
that's another strange thing, like,
that was
the
weird.
different ways people wake up from abductions, like, "Really? You're just gonna drop me in the middle of the hallway, you dick? Like, put me back in
Yeah,
bed, yeah, fluff my pillow." You're gonna do all that,
yeah.
but some people wake up outside, so it's
Well,
all very strange.
that's what, like, again, we try to put this label on thinking like, okay, these alien entities, if they're responsible for the abductions, that they are intelligent creatures, right? Because they can travel to and from the stars. Again, we are putting that logic on it. Well, if they're that intelligent, why are they making some of these ridiculous mistakes? Like, why are they returning people with their clothes on backwards?
Yeah, it's
Or
almost like
why
a
are
party
they,
joke that you play on one of your drunk friends, like, "Oh, it's"
yeah.
you know?
Or like, why are they tucking people in like super tight with like the
Yeah.
covers? Like, it's just, there's a lot of these aspects with the abduction experience that you don't hear a lot about. But I think if people realize this, they wouldn't immediately assume that these are intelligent beings. Um, these are weird beings. Uh,
Yes.
even with the MIB, right? They don't even appear extremely intelligent. Like I said earlier with the Shane Sovar case in Niagara Falls, they
Yeah.
came to visit Shane at work on the one day he was not working. So if they're so smart
Yeah.
and they can like anticipate our movements before we do them, then how come they didn't see that? Like,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly. What
just
it's
doesn't make any sense.
none of it makes sense, none of it. So, do you have so I see I'm looking at your skulls in the background. That was the end of my questions,
Mhm.
but now I have a question about your
Uh-huh.
skulls. So, you got the alien skull, but is that raven anything to do with Edgar Allan Poe?
Well, it's
Or
so,
is it just cool and you're like, "Yeah, skulls and ravens," like
no, you know what? I don't buy skulls. Like, all of the skulls that I've got were just given to me as gifts. Every single one of them. I have
"You're
one right here
weird.
in
Here's a
front of
skull
me.
with a raven on it."
Yeah, this
See?
one's like a, you got it.
That's
They're
cool.
everywhere. And I just have like, yeah, so there it is. This is actually like a 3D puzzle skull that I put
Yeah, I was
together.
wondering, what is it? Yeah, that's cool.
So, but again, this is like a gift. Like all
Well,
of
because
these
I only
skulls I
you're
have.
a poet, so I didn't know if you had a thing for Edgar Allan Poe because tomorrow's his birthday, and I'm going to his grave tomorrow, so
Really?
yep.
Wow. So
I'm
with
taking the kids
wow.
and everything. My friend's like, "I can't wait to see how fucked up your kids are because you're taking" I'm like, "No, they wanna be ghost hunters," like, with so
You know, I just I don't know. Like I've always had like I'm drawn to like darker writing, darker artwork.
Mm.
I just a lot of when I was in high school, I used to wear, yes, to fit in with the gothic crowd. Like I used to wear a lot of darker stuff. And it's just I don't know, I just love that style. I love that stuff.
Mm.
That doesn't mean like I'm obsessed with death, even though
Well
like,
well, now
my
people give you skulls as gifts, so that's nice.
right. I was born on the Day of the Dead, but it doesn't matter. So it's like
Awesome.
whatever. But I just love it. I embrace it, and just I don't know, with people out there listening, like don't change who you are. Don't try to fit into a neatly packaged, categorized box because other people can better identify with you. Like just be true to who you are. And even if you're a paranormal researcher, a paranormal investigator, and you're pursuing these things that have no clear direction or motive, or maybe there's not even a line of research devoted to what you're studying, keep doing it because we need people like you. We need the creative thinkers. We need the people who aren't afraid to challenge the cultural norms and the stereotypes that we've adopted for a lot longer than we should. So keep asking the questions.
Yep. That's important to hear too, because with the whole like world of aesthetics and this is aesthetic coffee TikTok and this is aesthetic paranormal, aesthetic witch, they got like herbs growing out of the fucking their head. So it's just like it's like everything has to be like in a nice little niche, and people aren't
Yeah.
really like that. I mean, sometimes it might be easier. I wish I was just one little, easy thing, but I don't think anybody is. So it's important to hear that, what you just said, and I think it's a great ending note. But before we end anything, do you have anything in the works? I told Juan I would ask his question, and it was also one of my questions. Do you have anything else coming up? Are you writing anything else? Are you have
Yeah.
anything happening soon?
Yeah, I always have something in the works. Some of it I could talk about, some of it I can't. Some of it's interesting. I mean, you might see one of my cases that I covered in the book, the Gary Sudbrink case. I was approached by A&E, their show The Proof Is Out There, so they might be featuring that case on a future
Cool.
episode. So I don't know. I stressed to them. I said, look, if you're going to do the case, please put it in context. Don't just play the tapes and just creep
Yeah.
people out. Like, give the backstory. At least, if you're not going to interview me for the show, interview Gary himself. Get the full
For
story.
sure, for sure.
I covered it in my book. There's a lot of strangeness here. And again, it's not just one experience, right? It's a multitude of experiences that individuals have. So that's one thing you might see. I was approached to do a show right before the pandemic, but that kind of fizzled out, be, because of the pandemic and whatnot. But I'm always looking for stuff. Yeah, I'm working on more poetry. I'm working on a follow-up book to the Spectrum. Yeah, it's fun time to be alive. It's a frustrating time in our society, but it's also an exciting time. And I love how we can have conversations like this. We can have conversation with regular people now about UFOs or UAP because they're real. I mean, we're past that conversation now. Where are they real? No, they're real.
Oh,
It's
for
happening.
sure. Yep. They're
It's
back in the
nuts,
news
right?
every day now. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting stuff, and I love it. So that's what I'm working on. Go to my website, normalparanormal.org. I try to keep that updated regularly. If you have had a strange experience, the viewers tonight, get in touch with me. There's a contact form out there. I'd love to hear your experience, especially if you can't put it into a neat packaged up box. Um, Share it with me. Strange people encounters. I love hearing about those. So yeah, we'll see where the future takes me.
Very cool. Thank you so much for coming on, and go follow him on, well, I have his website in the description, so you should be able to find that very easily. And follow his work. Go get the book, The Spectrum. If you're watching, mine's not showing up because my green screen feature, but he has a picture of it behind him next to his salt lamp. Nice lamp.
Yeah,
So
there we go. Just grab it. There we go. This is it. So get this at your wait, this is yeah, what is
everywhere.
it appearing? Is it appearing
It is. Yeah,
normal?
we can
Okay,
see it. We can see it. Yeah.
gotcha. I'm not sure if it like flips it on the recording, but yeah, check
No.
it out. It's on Amazon. It's in your local bookstore. It's available worldwide. And look, if you hate it, let me know. I'll send you a refund. I whatever. I just want people to read it.
You definitely
Um,
should read it. And it's also like it's easily read to, like, you can break it up too. It's not like one of those where like I read it super fast. I thought it was interesting, but like you don't have to. Like if it's nice to just have, like, if you're reading something else and you want to read something cool, like you can read a chapter at a time and it's like a story. So I like that. I like books like that you can break up, and not be like, well, now you're hanging into the next chapter, like fiction books do that.
yep,
So, but I like this one that you can just kind of like even hop around if you wanted to. But hang
that's how
out
I wrote it.
for a minute after I
Yeah.
end the broadcast. Thank you, everybody who's listening. Carolina, I see you. She always calls me out when I post a picture of a book that appears backwards. I'm like, you just got to read it in the mirror, buddy. Like that's what it's, but you don't have to read that picture in the mirror that he just put. It showed up the right way. Please give the channel a follow, share, subscribe. Go follow me on Spotify. I'm been up everybody's butt about that because I just started moving things. It's time consuming to move things over to Spotify. And if you're starting a podcast, do it right away. Don't wait like I did because it was dumb. So I hope to see you guys
Mm.
soon. I'm not sure what I have going on next. I scheduled lightly with the anticipation of taking more classes, and the classes got pushed to the summer because something else cool is happening. But yeah, I will talk to everybody soon. Have a great night and let me know what you think of the book and let Justin know what you think of the book. And yeah, I'll see you around. Bye.